You see, the decision to approach the issues of our time, the issues which are typically the subject matter of revolutionary movements, approaching them from the individual standpoint, the final decision was based upon the feasibility of being able to do so. This position and this decision could not have been taken on its own, purely as a matter to be considered between a social approach or an individual approach. It had to be taken into account whether it was possible to do so on a plane which would be qualitatively better than the previous attempts made in human history, so that one could have reason for expecting better results than those which were achieved in the past. And that then reduced the matter to not only one of theory, but also a consideration of whether it was practically achievable, and if so, how. What I've just mentioned about the problem of bringing our own mental processes within the reach of our intelligence and within the reach of our being able to apply that intelligence, assuming that we would be able to acquire that intelligence, then it would be a question of being able to apply it practically to the individual, so that there was a game plan for directing the social concern and the social commitments of the people of our own time to this task, as a practical endeavor. After all, do keep in mind that I was comparing the alternatives available to people of concern and involvement in our time. I was comparing expectations from a post-communist movement, a post-Marxist movement, in the light of the previous experiences. So, upon a consideration of all these aspects, then I felt that one had to go out into the unknown, and as you can see, the conclusions pointed in a specific direction, which one was able to arrive at logically and on the basis of the knowledge fund available in our time and the experience. Yet the actual journey was a journey into the unknown. It was an untrodden path, and the journey was not a linear journey. It involved organization, it involved a new kind of communication with people who would constitute that movement. It involved a new kind of persuasion and a completely new approach to making a movement. The previous models of political movement would not apply here. The rhetoric of the old movements also would not apply here. And so there was no existing model which one could lift of a revolutionary movement or a large social movement, which one just had to rehash, as it were, it was the whole thing was rife with problems of discovery and learning. So it was not lightly that I could come to these conclusions. I don't have suicidal tendencies, and I would not like to, having spent so much of my time in vain, I would not like to spend the rest of the remaining part of my time in futility. But however, when I put together all these things which I had been able to piece together, then after that I felt that I had a clear obligation to venture into the unknown. And so on that basis I proceeded to try and develop it. Right now I'm in the process of working out the details of how this thing is to be put together. I'm in no hurry to do that on my own. This preliminary work is what I had to do more or less by myself, because I could not find volunteers for a work so complex and so much in the future, a work so intangible even to the present knowledge fund. That much I had to do, and I'm not for a moment suggesting that my work is valid or correct. Hopefully it does furnish a basis for other people who find it plausible to refine it and to mature the work. And then comes the stage of trying to make a working plan for embarking upon it. That I said I'm in no hurry to formulate. I do have some ideas, and I am working on some more aspects of the task, but I would rather wait to see if a group can come together, a people of serious and responsible temperament and the degree of competency. So I would be feel much more comfortable if I could work with them, or if they by themselves could do that work on their own. But I admit that I don't find a sufficient reason to embark upon that also on my own. Look, it's like this. If the work that I have done, the preliminary work, if there are no real takers for that in my time, then I'll be perfectly willing to leave it for tomorrow after me. They may then tomorrow on review find it to have sufficient validity for them to want to own it, or they may finally come to the conclusion that this is not valid. So in either case, it would be other people who would be picking it up to discard it or to own it, whatever. And in the absence of a group of people in my time now who are willing to take an interest in it, a sufficient interest, and be willing to get it, to be involved with it, I find no point really in moving on to the next stage of the problems of its implementation and giving it the shape and form of an actual movement. I'm not saying necessarily a political movement. It is a movement of a new beginning in human history. I'm clear for myself that upon this premise, it is the beginning of another renaissance, and not just a political movement. Of course, politics will be a part of it. It can't be non-political, but it can't be political alone. It will have to be a much more holistic So that is where the matter stands. And to come back to the specific point you raised, I hope that I have given sufficient reasons for coming to the conclusion that if and when mankind is inclined to address the contemporary issues and problems and situation from a positive standpoint of looking into themselves, whether they have the will to confront it and do something about it. Obviously, this is not something that you can do in passing or as a marginal aspect of one's time and energies. Obviously, it will be something which will occupy a large segment of the energies and time and involvement of those individuals who subscribe to it. So it's a rather large deal. It's not a small deal. And so it is on that scale that they have to decide the matter. And as I see it, it's not a question of collecting a number of people on the basis of some slogans, revolutionary slogans, and basing the movement upon an existing discontentment, the kind of discontentment which would typically lead to a labor strike or a protest, a series of protests on the streets. It's something much bigger than that. It will involve a great deal of intellectual commitment without any barriers in the way of any physical commitment that may logically flow from that intellectual commitment, no holds barred. So now that in itself is a matter, if that is the nature of the movement, that in itself dictates that the focus must be on the individuals.